Hi, everyone. So I get to introduce one of my dear friends. She's been like a soul family for me for a while now, my dear friend Meg. And we've got to these deep parts of our co-creative processes. Now we get to really showcase Meg and what she's capable of. And before we dive into what she's going to be offering you, I want to point something out. I want you to listen for this. Find this, let it move through you. There's an energy of dignity. Meg's essence is the dignity of existence. And her dignification of processes, her dignification of the way that we heal trauma, the way that we navigate what's available now is incredibly important right now. So we want to set you up for success, and Meg's going to help you do that. So thank you so much, Meg, for standing in this power of dignity, which is your true self, and being able to offer an incredible journey so that people can actually play the new game board of empowerment and not lose. And we want to show you how to make it so that it's impossible for you to lose. And that's amazing. Thank you, Meg, so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Yeah, I can't wait to talk about this.
Yeah, so let's dive in. We literally have a brand new game board to play on, and it is made from, ironically, the formlessness that's occurring right now. And it will continue to occur. But what's happening to people right this moment in their personal lives is the shattering, the crumbling, the dissolving. And it's not just anything that's dissolving, it's really specific stuff that's dissolving. They have anchors in some things that we really know well, and those would be polarities, duality. Could you describe, Meg, what's dissolving right now and why is it so important?
Hmm. Let's see. I'll start by saying, right, because that's a big question. Um, I'll encourage people to look outside themselves first, right? Because we can see that's very easy to see. That's easy to see the division in the, especially in the US right now or in any other country, within families, within cultures, within communities. And that's a really big thing to take notice too, because what it's doing, we want to celebrate that in some ways and say thank you to the evolution of consciousness for showing us this, because this is what's so interesting and lovely about our lives, because it shows us exactly what's wanting to be seen, to be welcomed and integrated. And so the world is just showing us duality now and polarization, and it's showing it to us because it exists inside of us. And
Mm.
it's encouraging us to see it in ourselves. What you mentioned, the dignification of it is actually dignifying the duality and dignifying the polarities, because they're actually just here to mirror what's going on inside of us. And that what's going on inside of us is it's almost like being brought up, and it's rising so that we can start to dissolve it. What does that mean? We'll talk about that more later, but so that we can actually welcome it back, return it to where it came from. In other words, if you have a duality like right or wrong or good or bad, that's like a swinging of the pendulum of our preferences and our aversions, and it creates a structure. It creates a structure in our mind structure. It creates patterns and trauma and things like that. And so it's all coming up right now to be seen so that we can look inside and start to dissect it,
Mm-hmm.
take a look at it and start to dissolve it so that we can play in a new way, like you said, play in a new game board that has a whole different set of rules. And does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And these structures, of course, are born of trauma and programming and many other aspects. And we had defined it before our talk as personality. And so personality is this structure, it's structured. And there's two kinds. There's the structured personality that really distorts the soul's light. And it's there because it's going to protect you. But then there's this other version of personality. Would you talk about the structured personality born of trauma that is there to protect?
Yeah.
Could you describe that and give us an example?
Sure, definitely. Yeah, I love, well, I love working with polarities. I don't know why. I think it's because I just have seen for myself the magic that happens when they dissolve, when they are brought to rest, the light and the love that's available. So I start to look at this and I'm thinking, what's the best way to communicate this to people, maybe who haven't touched upon studying non-dual systems and things like that. And the biggest way that it shows up in our world is in people's personalities, in our personas, how we portray ourselves to the world, right? Whether you and I are nice, or we're cordial, or we're welcoming, or other people are more resistant and pushing away things, and they're more pushy. It's just what we've come to understand when we look backwards is, if we enter into this realm, right, when you're born, as a sovereign soul or as a light being, you could maybe bring with you some things from past lives, of course, and ancestry and cellular. But really, when you think about it, it's the aversions and protections that we had to do when we were small in order to be cared for, in order to be picked up out of the crib, in order to be not hurt, right? If there was trauma in the family, we had to learn how to act in a certain way so that we could be on guard and to not be traumatized or victimized if something, was going on in the household. So we've all found our way unconsciously through the muck of our upbringing, and that creates structures, that creates a way of being that solidifies into something we call the personality, because it's a way that we survived. It was a way to protect ourselves and be successful, right? So an example, for me, when I look back 10 years ago, I started looking back and really studying this. And what I saw was the main structure of who Meg Altendorfer at the time was an academic All-American who had her act together. And that's what I portrayed. That's what I went out and sold to people. Oh, I'm smart. I'm an athlete. She's got her act together. It was like, well, my world came a bit crashing down as a single mom. And it was like, oh, I started to see these were protections, right, to cover up something underneath, which was more of the wounds, the worthlessness, the victimization, the helplessness, some of the more soft and vulnerable parts that we tend to not want to show or see. And so the personality came in and it made up these things. I have to be great in school so I can start to get attention from people, or I need to do well in sports so that way I can get love, right? It's because we're always wanting to do something to get more love or attention as a small infant, because that's survival, right? That's survival. So we want to make sure we bow to and thank this personality structure. And in a way, some people call it ego, but then we start to get all, knotted around ego, thinking it's bad. I want to have us bow to it and thank it. It's a brilliant structure that we created out of survival and protection. And that's amazing. And that is us, our soul, that designed it. And once we start to see that we designed it, guess what? We can then start to dismantle it, right? But it's that solid structure that is so confined. It limits us in every way. It limits our perception of reality. It's a lens that we start to see life around. It limits us in how people perceive us, right? And so it's so limiting, that hard structure. So what you're pointing to is, as you start to dismantle or soften or dissolve some of it, there's so much more fluidity that lets the light flow through, that allows the kind of real self, the essence self, to be more alivened and full of life.
Yeah, and that's the sovereign self that is going to navigate this new world, this new game board. The sovereign self. And if we try to navigate the game board of sovereign service, and this game board of formlessness and pure love, which is immobile, it's immovable, it's omnipotent, and it's so pure now. It's being revealed in all of its glory as all of the structures we see outside of ourselves and inside begin to shift. And if we try to navigate that game board with any structure in place to protect us, it's literally us separating ourselves. It's an act of separation between us and the game board. And I think too that fluidity is so key, and it's so true, because then it doesn't bring forth the truth of someone's light so that it can attract the exact right people, situations, relationships, jobs. You can't attract that. You can't bring it in because people can't see the truth. It's kind of like walking past a window and it's got graffiti on it, or it's got, spikes coming out of it. Or in my case, it's a really abrasive but nice looking window. The niceness can be too abrasive because it was a way to protect myself and separate myself from being hurt. But when that is moved out of the way, the kindness, the true kindness of my soul can be seen. The thing that was actually moving through, it doesn't get distorted anymore then. And it completely changes your life. I mean, you and I can both attest to that as a process. But the cool part is that Meg's able to go dive down really, really deep into the foundations of why all of that occurs. And it has to do with those polarities, with duality itself. And so what polarities specifically are you going to be examining in the talk, in the program, multiple programs that you're going to be inviting people to? What polarities are the really biggest, juiciest ones that tend to create these abrasive structures of protective personality?
Yeah, as you and I have studied with the work of The Marriage of Spirit by Leslie Temple Thurston for a long time. And if you study that work, she talks about three main polarities that are pretty much the essence that builds up everything else. And that is victim tyrant, arrogance, worthlessness, and abundance and scarcity. And so when I start to look at my personality, right, or someone's personality, and I see there's always a preference for one side of each of those polarities, right? So for my example, it was it's not a preference, but it's like where my safety zone was. It was in scarcity, victimhood, and worthlessness. And so that side of the polarity was where I started to build up my personality structure, right? And so someone else, right, might have more of a power over personality, where it's more perceived as arrogant, tyrannical, and abundant, right? So there's two different energies. And so those are really the key energies that I see so many personalities that are organized around, right? We all talk about introvert versus extrovert, right? That's one that's very, commonly known. Oh, I'm introverted, my energy's in. I'm pulling in. I'm extroverted, my energy's out. And it's not really the true version, which is how you get your energy, but how we perceive someone's energy. Someone's energy who's pushing out is not such a good listener because their energy's out. Someone who's come inward, right, who resonates more on the worthlessness polarity is a very good listener, tends to be empathic and doesn't speak a lot, so becomes a good listener. So you can see how these polarities start to form preferences and aversions, right? So I prefer this side of the polarity for these three particular main polarities, or I prefer this side. And it starts to build up that protective, persona or egoic structure. And so during the 2-hour talk, what we're going to do is we're going to start to unwrap that and really start to look inside and see, oh, how do I prefer this, right? How have I built up, this personality structure? And how can I start to look at it in a way that starts to soften it? Awareness is key, right? First we see it. And if we can see it without judging it, then we'll start to soften it, just right from the get-go. And then in the longer 3-day course, what we're going to do is we're going to actually take time to dive really, really deep and wide, actually, expansive and deep, into each one of these three polarities. And I love to do that by a process, I usually call it a polarity meditation, or a dissolving duality meditation, where we actually go into the desires and the fears of both sides of these polarities. The desire to be worthless and the fear of being worthless, the desire to be arrogant and the fear of being arrogant. It sounds strange right now. Who would ever desire
right.
to be arrogant, right? But the thing is, half of these structures lie in our unconscious, and we have to coax them out with appreciation and gentleness, so that we can start to hold them all and welcome them all to come inside of us. Because the only problem is that we've kept them separate and outside of us. That's all. So does that give a little bit of an idea of how we start to work with these?
Oh, yes. And I love how the reconciliation is not brutal. You don't need to go into your subconscious and slave drive all of this structure out. It's radical kindness, deep gentleness, it's dignification that can draw it out. And it can be done in very huge amounts with kindness. These structures then, there's a self-compassion that occurs, which you're so good at, Meg. The self-compassion, the compassion for these structures. We begin in a way to even fall in love with them for how genius they really were, and for how important they have been for our soul's learning. And that's the sovereign self stepping onto the game board and saying, there is nothing here that I cannot have compassion for. There's nothing here that I cannot love, because it's all made of and coming from the omnipotence of love. That's the new game.
Yeah.
It's so formless and so apparent. And all the structures and protections will become increasingly unbearable, as they already are currently. It's just going to get increasingly so. So perfect timing, of course, for this deepening of the inner work. And so, folks, if you really want to get rid of trauma trash bags, this framework of thinking, this approach, is done so deeply and gently and kindly, but it does do massive shifts, because you're using these very grand, big magnets of polarity and desire and fear that will draw all these things out. And it can be deeply surprising what shows up. If I may, I'd like to give an example.
Definitely.
So we do share a common teacher. Lucia is our teacher. And at one point I was assisting, which, talk about arrogance, worthlessness dynamic. If you're the assistant and you're the youngest person at the retreat or the workshop or whatever, lots of opportunity to pet my ego and also to feel crazy worthless. But at one point, Lucia said to me, you need to be more ruthless. And then the next day she said, your niceness is abrasive. So she was pointing at a polarity in me that has a core root. So ruthlessness versus niceness Well, of course, that core root's going to go straight into arrogance, worthlessness. That's what it's anchored in. It's like it's like another way of saying the same thing, arrogance, worthlessness. And so I sat with this and I realized, well, the reason why I have so much niceness is because I really didn't want anybody to really know what I'm really thinking. Because if they knew what I was really thinking, they probably wouldn't like me. So obviously born of trauma and not being liked at certain points or being told I was unlikable or whatever, stuff I don't even remember necessarily. It doesn't matter. That's why this is important, because it digs up the subconscious possibilities. So then I sat and I thought, well, if they don't like me, they might banish me. Worthlessness. They might banish me. And if they do like me, they'll accept me. Arrogance. When have I desired banishment? And when have I feared banishment? Well, fearing banishment was the obvious one. Desiring acceptance was the obvious one. It got really juicy when I asked myself, when have I feared acceptance? When have I desired banishment? This just blew me wide open. It blew me wide open. It opened up all these, not only this lifetime, but many lifetimes of, well, if I'm banished, then I can just do whatever I want, and then no one's going to judge me for it. Well, if I get accepted, does that mean that I can't leave? Like if I don't like it? But it brought up all these deep possibilities out of me that I didn't have access to before. I couldn't see them before until I'd asked those questions. And it changed me immensely, just that single dynamic. And so that's how powerful this work is. Now there's no abrasive niceness. Now it's genuine, heartfelt, from true love, kindness, without attachment, without fear or desire. And that's what we're talking about. That's what's possible, that you can navigate this into a state of being your true sovereign self and neutrality, where you're not going to desire or fear anything. It's going to be the purity of your soul and that light that will shine through. And that's the fluid personality, the fluid enlightened personality. That transforms the life that we experience. And it's our chance now to do it probably faster than ever. And that's what Meg is going to offer us. Does that sound true, Meg? All of that?
Oh, totally. And I appreciate your example because that's so true. It's like a magical elixir, an alchemy of dissolving the structures simply by looking at what is in the unconscious and welcoming it. And I just want to highlight that neutral state that you're talking about. Some people think, oh, I don't want to be neutral, but it's beyond describable. It's a stillness. That's how I experience it. It's an inner stillness that isn't as mind crazy, right? It's just a very much, if you can think of relaxing back into the stillness of who you really are at the core. That's how I like to feel into it and think about it, and that's what then shines naturally out. For people who are struggling out there with even getting work out in the world. I'm sure there's lots of people listening who have ideas, on how to be of service, of sovereign service. A lot of times, the worthlessness, arrogance polarity is what stops us. It's the structure that stops us. And you know me, I've been working for months now specifically on dissolving worthlessness so that I could have more of a contribution of my light, of my work, from a place of neutrality rather than proving or doing something out of making up for the worthlessness.
Yeah.
So there's a beauty in finding the main polarity that stops you from doing whatever you're wanting to do, and dissolving that, and that frees you up. There's more freedom there.
Yes, truly. There's also, and it's so brilliant what you said, the soul itself has created these structures in order to truly learn from them. And there's many people out there who would say, well, I don't trust my soul. And I want to speak to that just right now because it's come up in the field. But this methodology, this approach of gentleness and kindness is going to help you to trust your soul. You'll trust your soul to truly be able to understand what those structures were there for, how they've served you, and that will be that's half of it. To be able to say, oh, I see very clearly now, I can feel clearly now that the soul wasn't punishing me, but to draw these things in, that I actually am the soul and I'm wanting to finalize them, to reconcile them, to bring them home in my heart and my soul so I can know them so fully, and then it doesn't have power over me anymore. Would you say that that is a possible outcome for people who are really feeling separate from their soul?
Oh yeah. Yeah, because you feel like you feel into that, and the only thing that's keeping separate is a structure. And so we're dissolving these structures, and then it's like a recognition or a remembrance. It's like, oh, that's who I am. Right. And I love how you said it. I remember the moment I was really getting this, where it's like, I created that duality. I created that polarity. Like, whoa, like that was brilliant. That was a brilliant structure. And it's so affirming to yourself and nurturing to yourself, because you're starting to see, like, this is not pseudo power. This is true, authentic, inner aligned power. And that's who we all are. There's nothing special about this, right? That's who we all are at our core. It's just a matter of dissolving the things that are getting in the way from us seeing it and remembering it and knowing it,
Yeah.
and living it.
Yeah. Yeah. That light is immense. It's not that it's special, it's immense. It's immense. It permeates all consciousness. And then there's not a need to have to trust or try to build trust. It's already built in because it's all you. It's all part of you. It's not separate. I too also have had those moments where I'm like, oh yes, I can see exactly what I created. Wow, that's really quite clever. Look at how that I structured that. I set that all up. And you know, and some of it, like even recently, it's around the power over paradigm. Having finally admitted to myself that I positioned myself in places of power over, even though I've been talking for ages now about that paradigm being done. Now it's percolated into this fluidness where I can happily, with joy and amazement, perceive these wonderful structures that I have created to learn from, to actually be able to finally walk my talk when it comes to the power over, and then entering into empowerment to empower others. And I think that that's what sovereign service is. It has to do with empowerment, but we empower ourselves. And this, you can't empower anybody else until you feel empowered. This, what Meg is teaching, is one of the greatest tools of my life, of her life. And she does it with a very special style so that you can actually feel dignified in your true empowerment and not feel guilty about it and not feel pain around it, but to feel the expansiveness of it. And then everything opens up. The window is clear and the light comes through, and the people, places, relationships, jobs, situations, they get attracted to that light, the true you, not the distortions of protection. And that's what we want for all of you, for us too. It's a great gift that you give, Meg, in all of your knowledge and ability, but your gentleness to be in witness and dignify this grand process for our consciousness. Thank you.
You're welcome. I love it. It's an honor. It's an honor and it's a journey. I think I would just end with that, saying that it's the joy that you feel after dissolving or bringing a polarity to rest, it encourages you to go look for more. Go look for more dualities, because you just know that there's more light and there's more love.
Yeah.
That's just waiting there. So it's an honor to facilitate this and teach this with people. So thank you.
It's going to be so special. And I also agree. I'm constantly seeing dualities everywhere, these polarities. And it makes actually things a lot simpler. It makes the world make more sense, because if there's a situation that I'm in where I'm being perceived as a tyrant or a victim, I can drop the rope now and I can bring it all home into myself and approach the situation from my soul. And that's the practical of it. So you're having a talk first, and when is your talk going to be?
The 2-hour talk is Saturday, this coming Saturday, October 31st, at 11 a.m. Eastern. And then the 3-hour course is 2 weeks after that. And that starts November 13th. It's a Friday evening in the East Coast. And then there's 2 sessions on Saturday, the 14th, and 2 sessions on Saturday or Sunday, the 15th. And it'll wrap up probably around maybe 7 o'clock Eastern that day.
So folks, you have this chance to really dive deep into this and finalize this for yourself as we enter into 2021 and the incredible amount of empowerment, formlessness, light that's available. This tool will be a lifelong blessing. It will change your life as it has ours. And she and I can talk, Meg and I can talk about this all day long with the same gusto and joy, because we know because we are truly so much happier because of this. And so this is such an immense, wonderful offering. I'm so, so proud that this is happening right now. It's perfect timing. And indeed, you'll be able to use this forever. It's never going to go out of style. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Meg. Any last empowerment comments that you want to give to our audience about this process inside themselves?
You know, the only thing that comes to me is we could talk forever, right? But the thing that I'll put this little seed out there to finalize this, is that every energy needs an equal and opposite energy, right? Like a puzzle piece. So my worthlessness required someone else's arrogance to show up so that I could stay stuck in my worthlessness. It was like a dance, a polar opposite dance. So I would actually attract people. And that's what you were pointing to there. And so by us dropping the rope, resting, coming back into the resting position, guess what? I don't need to attract the opposite. I don't need to attract a tyrant so that I can be my victim, or I don't need to attract an arrogance so that I can feel my worthlessness. I'm done playing in that game board, right? Or we can be done playing in that particular game board and just rest in our sovereignty and then create from there, because we're all creator beings. And that's the joy and the beauty that can come from dissolving these dualities.
Thank you for that. That really sums it up nicely. Gives people a chance to sit with that possibility, and to be able to know too, folks, that you're looking at 2 people who can attest to this being possible, and that we're still using this. You don't ever stop using it, but it brings you to that possibility of pure light and neutrality that we've all craved, and to be able to be in non-reaction and true love and compassion, but more so for your special light, your soul's light, which is very important right now, for that to become through you and your life without distortion. That's what we're hoping for, because guess what? The more humans that do that, the quicker the physicality of change will unfold here on this planet. So we know that that's true. And the tools and the way that Meg teaches these tools is going to be so gentle. I can't wait for you to look forward to that because it's so peaceful and warm and gentle and loving. If you've ever wished that someone would walk with you and treat you with dignity, then you have this chance now to walk with Meg during this special offering. So I hope that you will enjoy it as much as I know that you will. I know you will. So I don't have to wonder. I do know. Thank you so much, Meg. I love you.
You're welcome. I love you.
Namaste.
Namaste.